Welcome back to the channel. Grab a drink, get comfortable, and tell me in the comments what city you're listening from, because today's story starts with a marriage cracking in public and ends with a lesson nobody at that dinner table will ever forget. My name is Ethan Crow, and my wife Marina and I had been struggling for a while, but the night everything snapped happened at her parents' place, up in a fancy neighborhood where the plates cost more than my entire wardrobe and the family dinners felt like courtroom trials. We were halfway through dessert when Marina finally decided to make me the evening's entertainment, and she did it with a smile sharp enough to cut glass. She grabbed my wallet, tossed it onto the polished dining table like she was throwing down evidence, and bills and cards scattered near the crystal glasses. "Look at this," she said, voice loud enough to make sure nobody missed it. "You can't even handle the basics." Then she turned toward her mother, like she wanted approval for the execution. "I'm tired of dragging a man who can't pay his own life." And the room went quiet in that way rich rooms go quiet, like everyone is waiting for a verdict. Her mother pressed her lips together with that trained expression people develop after decades of judging others without moving a muscle. Her father cleared his throat and stared into his drink like he could disappear inside it, and Marina's sister Sonia watched from across the table with a smug little grin that said she'd been waiting for this episode. Then Sonia's husband, Dylan, leaned back in his chair and delivered the line that was meant to finish me. "She deserves better?" He chuckled, not even looking at my face. His eyes locked on my car keys sitting near my plate. He tapped the table near them and added, "And that old beat-up Porsche you drive? I could take it off your hands, do you a favor, spare you the embarrassment." Like he was offering charity to a stray. I looked around at these people I'd called family for 4 years and realized nobody was going to step in. Nobody was going to say, "Enough," because to them this wasn't cruel. It was entertainment. Marina sat there breathing fast like she was righteous, her manicured fingers trembling from the dramatic toss, hair perfect, dress expensive, face flawless in the way money can polish a person, but all I could see was the ugliness underneath the shine. Her father finally tried to soften it with a quiet, "Ethan, maybe we should all calm down." But it was too late, the damage was already done, and I didn't have the energy to argue with a room full of people who'd already decided who I was. I stood slowly, my chair scraping the floor, and I gathered my scattered cash and cards with careful, deliberate movements, the kind you make when you're trying not to explode. No one helped, no one apologized, not even my wife. The only sounds were a ticking clock in the corner and ice clinking in somebody's water glass. When I had everything in my hand, I looked at Marina and said, calm as a flat line, "You're right, you do deserve something better." And I placed the wallet right back in the middle of the table like a challenge, like a final punctuation mark. Then I walked out into the cool evening air, leaving their murmurs to spin up behind me as soon as the front door closed, because I knew exactly what they were going to do. Replay the scene, laugh at my meltdown, congratulate Marina for finally standing up for herself, and act like I was the problem. What they didn't know, what Marina didn't know was that in about 70 hours I was going to be worth more than all of them combined, and I liked it that way. I slid into my worthless Porsche, turned the key, and the engine purred smooth and confident, like it had nothing to prove, and I drove away slow enough for anyone watching through their fancy curtains to see me leaving. 3 days, I told myself, just 3 days. My garage had always been my sanctuary, but that night it felt like a command center, the place where patience and planning finally become power. I sat in my worn leather office chair, the one Marina always complained about because it didn't match her idea of what successful should look like, and stared at the email sitting in my inbox, the one I'd reread so many times it felt unreal. The subject line was boring on purpose, something like Final Documents Project R, but the attachment inside was a signed acquisition agreement, and the numbers on it could rearrange a life. My company, the failing little tech project Marina loved to mock, was being acquired by a major global player, not Microsoft this time, but another giant you've definitely heard of, for around $20 million after conversions and fees, and once everything cleared and taxes got carved out, my take-home was still life-changing. Not bad for the man who can't pay the bills. According to the woman who slept next to me, I cracked open a craft beer and let my eyes drift across the garage. Organized chaos to most people. Labeled bins, parts on shelves, tools hung with surgical precision, and in the middle of it all, under a battered cover, my pride and joy. With a small flourish, I yanked the cover off and the car caught the overhead lights like liquid fire, glossy guards, red paint, chrome clean enough to mirror a face. I'd spent 2 years restoring it, hunting original parts, rebuilding the engine with my own hands, refusing shortcuts because I wasn't building a prop. I was building something that lasts. Dylan thought it was junk, Marina thought it was embarrassing, and she'd begged me to sell it a dozen times so we could look like we're moving up. But she never understood that real success isn't a costume you wear to impress people at dinner tables. It's the long game, the quiet work when nobody is clapping. My phone buzzed. First a message from Dylan in a group chat with Marina. No hard feelings about dinner, man. If you ever want to dump that old car, I know a guy who'll give you scrap value. Just trying to help. I laughed out loud, the sound bouncing off the concrete walls. Then Marina texted, Ethan, please come home. I didn't mean it.
I'm sorry.
Then Sonia, Mom feels bad. She wants to know if you're okay. And then Dylan again, doubling down. Seriously though, I could probably get you like 3 or 4 grand for it, cash. It was almost impressive how confidently he stayed wrong. I set the phone down and opened the bottom drawer of a filing cabinet Marina had never bothered to touch because it was boring business stuff. And behind restoration receipts and old show paperwork sat a sealed folder marked confidential. Inside was 3 years of my life. Incorporation records, NDAs, patent filings, cap tables, timelines, everything. And the one detail that mattered most, the company had been formed months before Marina and I got married, which meant it was mine, legally, separate, protected. She could scream, cry, throw wallets, threaten divorce. None of it changed the paperwork. She'd be entitled to half of the marital assets. Sure. The home equity, the joint savings, a few shared purchases, but the real money, the money that flips a life upside down, was untouchable. Another email came in from the acquiring company's legal team confirming the final review, the wire scheduled for Monday morning, and I leaned back and stared at the calendar. Friday the 13th. Unlucky for some people, I guess, but it felt like my luck had finally decided to show up on my side. I spent Saturday mostly in the garage, letting Marina's texts stack up while I decided how clean I wanted to play this. By afternoon she showed up in person, clicking across the driveway in an outfit designed to look casual but expensive. Makeup perfect, hair perfect, every detail chosen to remind me what I'd lose if I didn't fall back in line. She opened the side door without knocking and said, "We need to talk." In a voice that was softer than Friday but colder in a different way, like someone negotiating a deal. I kept my eyes on the engine I was pretending to work on and said, "I think you said plenty at dinner." And she tried to rewrite history, calling it a misunderstanding, saying she was frustrated, saying she didn't mean it. Then she launched into the same speech she always used when she wanted to pressure me. How our house wasn't impressive enough. How my car was humiliating. How our furniture was temporary. How she couldn't invite friends over without feeling embarrassed. How we hadn't taken a real vacation. How she felt like she was the only one who cared about being successful. When I told her the furniture was fine, she scoffed and said the brand name like it was an insult. And then, like a knife twist, she brought up Dylan's offer, acting like he was being generous and I was being stubborn. "We could use that money," she said, eyes bright with the fantasy of upgrading our life overnight. A better down payment, a trip, a new wardrobe, something that fits who we're supposed to be. And then she gave me the ultimatum in the sweetest voice. She wanted proof, a sign that my work was leading somewhere, because she was tired of waiting. I stared at her and realized she genuinely believed I was nothing, and that she only wanted to love me if I could fund the image she wanted. So I said, "Give me 3 days." And she narrowed her eyes. Suspicious, but she agreed, 3 days, and if she didn't see something real, then we'd have a very different conversation. When she walked away, her heels sounded like a countdown. That evening I called Alyssa Mercer, a high-level attorney I'd met at a conference, the kind who specializes in asset protection and high-net-worth divorces, and when she answered, I didn't stumble. "I need to file first thing Monday morning," I said, and she didn't act surprised. She just asked for details, like this was another Monday for her. Sunday night, I sat in my home office going through the bills Marina swore I couldn't pay, and the irony was almost poetic. Utilities auto-paid, mortgage never missed, everything covered. Just not from the joint account Marina watched like a scoreboard. I'd kept that account intentionally modest so she'd stop burning money on appearances, while the real operating expenses and planning flowed through accounts she never asked about. She never asked because she didn't care how things worked, only what they looked like. Late that night, Dylan texted again with a higher offer for the Porsche, like he was a shark circling what he thought was blood, and I scrolled through photos from last month's car show where my junk had been displayed next to supercars, a sign in front listing the model and an estimated value that would make Dylan choke. I remembered seeing him at that show too, walking right past my car without recognizing it because he'd only ever seen it covered in my garage. Then Marina called, voice soft, trying to stitch the marriage back together with apologies and romance, asking if I'd come to bed, and when she said she was sorry for throwing my wallet, I told her the truth. It was childish, but it was honest, and she went quiet. I asked her when the last time was that she'd asked about my work. Not the money, not the timeline, but the actual thing I was building, and she admitted she didn't understand it. Why don't you want to? I asked, and she didn't have a good answer. I told her, tomorrow you'll understand everything. And she made me promise, and I did, but I added, after tomorrow, things will be different one way or another. And I hung up before she could ask what that meant. Monday morning, I sat in Alyssa's office signing the last page of the divorce petition when my phone chimed with the alert I'd been waiting 3 years to hear. Incoming wire received, funds available. An amount so large it looked fake on a screen. Alyssa glanced at it, lifted her eyebrows and said, "Congratulations. This makes everything simpler." Because now the timeline was sealed and the separation was clear, and the papers went out for service that afternoon. I spent the rest of the morning locking down accounts, setting up private banking, changing numbers, tightening security, making sure nothing could be touched without my signature. Meanwhile, my phone kept lighting up with Marina's messages asking where I was, why I wasn't answering, whether everything was okay. When she finally called, demanding to know what kind of meetings I was in, I told her, the kind you've never been interested in. And when she tried to backpedal, I reminded her of every line she'd said at that table, every insult, every public humiliation, and then I told her, you were right about one thing. You do deserve better. And I ended the call. By late afternoon, Alyssa called my office line and said the papers had been delivered and Marina was not taking it well, insisting there must be a mistake because I couldn't afford a divorce lawyer, claiming it was a joke. Alyssa hadn't told her the number, she didn't have to, because the acquisition had already hit the news, and once it's public, it spreads fast through the exact kind of social circle Marina cared about. The same people who watched me get mocked on Friday were now reading headlines about the failure who just sold his company for a fortune. My phone, once I turned it back on, erupted with calls, texts, voicemails. Sonia begging me to call, Marina's mother calling me, dear, like she'd always loved me. Dylan suddenly talking like we were brothers and asking to talk about the car, revising his lowball offer as if embarrassment could be negotiated away. That evening I drove home the long way through the city, checking the red lights and watching the number of missed calls climb like a score, and when I finally pulled into the driveway I didn't go inside. I went straight to the garage, uncovered the Porsche, sat in the driver's seat and listened to the quiet because I knew the real show was just beginning. Tuesday morning my phone looked like it had survived a natural disaster. Dozens of unread messages and a stack of voicemails, and I made good coffee, the expensive kind I'd been rationing, and I listened like it was a playlist. Marina furious, Marina confused, Marina panicking, Marina bargaining, Marina crying about how lawyers cost money and how her credit cards were maxed because she'd been keeping up appearances. Dylan apologizing with sudden humility, Dylan admitting he'd Googled the car and calling himself an idiot, family members warning me not to let money change me, as if money was the problem and not the way they treated me before they knew I had it. By the time I finally answered Marina's call, her voice sounded like someone standing on the edge of a cliff. She poured out apologies, insisted it wasn't about the money, blamed me for hiding it, said she couldn't have known, said we were married and spouses share things. I let her talk, then I asked her one simple question. What exactly are you sorry for? And when she couldn't answer cleanly, I spelled it out. Was she sorry for calling me a loser, for humiliating me, for letting her brother-in-law talk down to me, for treating me like a stepping stone, or was she only sorry she'd found out she'd been wrong? She tried to cry her way into the victim role, claiming I kept secrets, But I didn't buy it because trust isn't demanding proof after you throw someone under a bus. Trust is believing in the person you married before the world applauds them. I told her, "You want to look successful." I wanted to become successful. Those are not the same thing. And she asked what it would take to fix it. I said, "Nothing." Because some things can't be unbroken, and then I gave her the bottom line. She'd get what the law allowed, half of the shared assets, not the company money, not the patents, not the acquisition windfall, just the portion tied to the marriage. She whispered that it wasn't enough, that it wouldn't even cover her debt, and I told her, as calmly as I'd spoken at that dinner table, "Then you shouldn't have maxed out your cards trying to look rich while you were married to the man you called a failure." And I ended the call. Outside, the morning was bright, the air clean, the world moving forward like it always does, and for the first time in a long time I felt light. Not because of the money, not even because of the revenge, but because the weight of pretending was gone. And if you made it this far, hit like, subscribe, and tell me in the comments, what would you have done in my place, and do you think people reveal their real selves when you're broke? Or when you finally win?